Hi, this is Jonathan, and welcome to Configuring Transport Side Connectivity, and this is part 1 of 2. So basically, this is going to be setting up the connection from the VPN 0 side into the SD-WAN fabric, okay? And as I said, this is part 1 of 2, so this section is going to be in 2 parts. So stay tuned for the second section after this one. Basically, we're going to describe how do we do it. It's pretty straightforward. I did draw this here. I didn't see it. There wasn't a graphic for this one, so I added this one, and clearly I'm going to be adopted by Cisco to make these icons in the future. Basically, if your V-Edge device is behind a router here, like this, we're not directly connected to the WAN cloud. All right, we've got some intermediary device, and this can be a PE router, or it could be some other device in your environment that's just handling other connectivity to the internet network or whatever. And for some reason, and we can talk about why those reasons are, we can't replace this device with the V-Edge router. And this could be for many reasons. Some good ones are that that router is running unified communications, it's terminating off-net VPNs because it's running a Cisco firewall service. We could also, there could be many other reasons of why we can't. It could also be a third-party device that we don't control. So let's say you're, this is actually the provider's CE router. So this is under their control, and they won't let you replace it, for instance. That's the only, so basically we're going to be putting the V-Edge device behind it, so we can't replace that device. All right? But we still need to enable communication and make sure that these routes get to the V-Edge device and vice versa. All right? And remember we said that there was a 99.9% of the time we wouldn't use a routing protocol over here? This is that 0.1% of the time. All right, so how do we accomplish this? Well, basically what we're going to do is we're going to put a loopback interface on VPN 0 to terminate the connection back to vSmart. The problem here is that VPN 0 may only have a private connection to other sites, and we need the route to route our controlled connection back through the inside network. So we have to put those connections into VPN 0 so we can build tunnels over them. Remember, the tunnel connections have to be built on VPN 0. So if our vSmart is back over here, right, or this device is what's providing our internet access, we still need to route back through that other device, okay? So since we're not directly connected to the WAN cloud, the V-Edge router can't communicate with that vSmart controller in the overlay network. But we still need to enable this, all right, connectivity to the vSmart and other devices. So what we can do is we configure OSPF or BGP in this domain right here. Okay, and I know that's a little scribbly, but if you've been following along, you can see how I was adding stuff to it. Okay, and basically, loopback 0 is going to be in VPN 0, so we can build tunnels across it. It's a virtual transport interface, and it terminates those DTLS and IPsec tunnel connections, which are required for the V-Edge router to participate in that overlay network. When those V-Edge routers at the local site don't connect directly to the WAN cloud, but are one or more hops from the WAN and connect indirectly through a non-SD-WAN hub router, such as this guy right here. And let me erase some of this stuff so you can actually see that again. So we need to be able to, because they're not connected directly, and we're a couple of hops away, we have to connect through that other non-SD-WAN router. We must enable some kind of standard routing on the V-Edge. That's going to be OSPF or BGP. So in VPN 0, we're going to configure we can also configure a physical interface that connects the two together. So instead of having a loopback, we could actually have like a GE0/1 or something here. So we can also have that physical interface that connects that V-Edge to its neighbor, either that provider edge router or in the case of MPLS, or some next hop router at the local site. But we won't connect a DTLS tunnel to that interface. Instead, we would actually be connecting the IPsec tunnel, okay? So let's configure a loopback interface, physical interface, and that routing protocol under VPN 0, okay? So under VPN 0, all right, we're going to go to configure, configure, and then feature templates, and then under VPN 0, we're actually going to add BGP. So let me give you a little description of what's happening here. So under the transport and management here, we have a VPN 0 interface and then a 512 interface. That's our management interface, right? This one's going to connect back to vSmart. And then there's VPN 0, which is our transport VPN. To add the BGP feature template, we would have already created it, and then we just click BGP right here, and it'll add a BGP box here, and then we can select which BGP template we're going to use. Okay? And then once we do that, we actually choose, and if there's no template there, which there isn't in this case, we can actually create it right here. And then once or we can select it and then view it. There's a view option right there. You'll see a view template. So if you want to see what the contents of that template are, if you click view template, they'll pop up in another window. And if it doesn't exist, you'd create it here. My recommendation is to create that BGP template, separate feature template, prior to this step. Because if you're doing it on the demand, there's a high probability you're going to be doing it as a one-off. And if you do it as a one-off, there's a high probability we're going to have everything's going to end up being a one-off, and the advantages we have from templating kind of evaporate. Okay. Generally, we're going to want to create those the feature templates first, then combine them together in device templates. Just an FYI, that BGP template's the same regardless of whether it's applied to VPN 0 or VPN 1 or whatever. The functionality here is the fact that it's a BGP template, and we're just applying it to the interface here. All right. So here's the configuration of that. The example on this one, this is a minimal BGP transport side routing config in which the loopback address is advertised to all the vEdge router's BGP neighbors. Note that even though we didn't configure any services on the tunnel interface, these services are associated with the tunnel by default and are included in the configuration. Because the services affect only physical interfaces, you can ignore them on loopback interfaces. Okay? So here we go. We're going to go VPN 0. And then, so you haven't seen this before, but I'm going to show you the fact that you can do this. You can say VPN 0 interface gig slot IP address in one command line. You don't need to separate these out. Or you can type these in separate commands, VPN 0, then go to the interface, and then type the IP address if you want to. Okay? And this will bring you into that configuration command. Okay? And then, of course, no shut it because everything's shut down initially. Right? And we're doing the same thing here. These are 3 separate commands in one line. The configuration on this on the vEdges allows that configuration. And then we're specifying a color for that tunnel interface, as we would any other VPN 0 interface. All right, and then we'd also configure that we're doing the same thing where we've got the same 2 commands in one. So this is actually 2 commands, and we can do that all on the same line. They're doing it here to save space, but this is totally legitimate to do on the device itself. So if you see this and you've never seen something like that before, just understand that that is a valid configuration. All right? And then we're going to apply a prefix list specifying the loopback, and of course that loopback is going to be a /32 because it's an individual host. Okay? And then we create a route policy to affect that loop interface, that loopback's interface prefix, right? Because we want to make sure that we advertise the loopback, so we want to match that, but we want to reject everything else. Remember, we're only trying to advertise the loopback's prefix. Okay? And then if we want to, we can actually apply that to only a specific neighbor. And we can apply it to so the loopback's advertised to all neighbors, and we can also block it to specific neighbors as well. Okay? All right, and OSPF is configured this very similarly. We have a transport management VPN, and then we just, under VPN 0 here, we're going to add OSPF. Just click that plus sign, and it'll add a box there for OSPF. It'll do this with each of them. You can add individual VPNs, so like here we can add a VPN interface. We can add a new IPsec interface, etc. You can you'll see this configuration when you start getting into the labs if you're doing them, and you'll see that you can select all kinds of sub-templates from here. All right. You'll also be able to add physical interfaces from here as well. Okay? But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to select OSPF and add it, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing before. We're going to go and browse for that OSPF template. So just to give you an idea of what actually happened here, so you did that, you click that plus sign, and it added this guy right here. Right? It just drags it over. Okay? And then you have a choice again of selecting an existing OSPF template or creating a new one. Again, I really recommend that you create those those feature templates prior to adding them to device templates. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of one-offs, and you want to make sure that we're not creating 300 OSPF templates. I'd rather create one template which has variables for area ID and router ID and everything else that can be customized for each site, so that when I add OSPF, I'd add those variables to it, as opposed to creating 300 OSPF templates and you're spending 40 minutes trying to figure out which one you want to apply to this guy. Okay? All right, and again, same thing. Multiple lines on the same command. We're no shutting that physical interface, and then we're creating that loopback and assigning a color to it. Okay. And this is minimal OSPF transport side routing configuration, okay? We're not talking about doing massive amounts of config here. And again, because even though you didn't configure any services on the tunnel interface, these services are going to be associated with that tunnel by default and are included in that config. Okay. All right. And then we can finally configure OSPF, right? And we assign it to that loopback interface, right? We're going to specify the area, and then we specify the interface. Okay. So basically, Cisco SD WAN devices can connect to the WAN indirectly. So if they're not actually the CE router or your edge router, which changes the definition of the word vEdge, but if they're not your edge device, you can still use them to tunnel through another device. When we talk about integrating vEdges and other SD-WAN components into your existing network, these ideas are going to become pretty important as we have to drag connections through another device that may have different connections than the vEdge device does, especially when we're doing some interoperations. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more content.